Welcome back, guys. In this video we will take a look at constraint priorities. So let's take an example. Say we have a button placed at a certain distance from the bottom of the container. To be more specific, we have set a vertical constraint of 10. Now I add a similar constraint to the bottom, setting its vertical distance to 15. And to confound things a bit more, I set a third constraint similar in nature with a vertical distance of 20. Now this does not make sense since all three constraints cannot be satisfied simultaneously. But what if we could assign priorities to each of these constraints, say high, medium and low? In this case, the high priority will kick in and not the other two. And if for some reason the high priority constraint is unable to kick in, the medium priority would take its place, and so on. In this lesson, we will look at an example that demonstrates constraint priorities. We will start by building a layout that looks like the flag of Germany. Here it is. Right, so let's start by creating a new Xcode project, a single view application. Let's call it Constraint Priorities. The language will be Swift, the device the iPhone. Let's click on Next and create this project. And now we go to the navigation window, highlight the main storyboard, highlight the view controller, go to the file inspector and disable universal size classes, keeping it only for the iPhone. Now let's suppress this navigation window and now let's add some views to the canvas. So we'll add 3 views. So let's start and drag and drop a view on the canvas, stretch it out a bit, and now we'll create a duplicate. In fact, two duplicates, sorry. So here's our second duplicate. And here's our third duplicate. And please note that 3 views are appearing under the super view on the left. And now we're going to add some constraints. But before that, let's set some background colors. So let's go to the attribute inspector and set this to black. The second view we will set to red. And the third one to yellow or gold. Okay, so now this resembles a pattern similar to the flag of Germany. So here are our 3 views. So now we're going to add some constraints. So we drag and drop the view to the top and we'll create equal width constraints because we want these subviews to be of the same width as the super view. So we're going to add 3 constraints. There are other ways of doing so, but let me use this way for this example. So there we are. 3 constraints, and you can see the constraint box opening up there. And now we're going to add some more constraints. And this time we will set equal heights. So I'm going to set, now this might look a bit weird at the moment. How could the sub view be of the same height as the super view? But bear with me. So that's one there. But as you can see, our constraints are not looking very readable. So I'm going to change things a bit out here. So I'm going to set labels for each of these sub views. And for that, we go here to the identity inspector and we change the labels. I'll call this the top view. This one will be the middle view. And lastly, this one will be the bottom view. So as you can see, the text of the constraint section is also changing and it's much more readable now. Great. So now we've got a constraint here that says the height of the top view is equal to the super view's height. And that, of course, is not what it should be. It should actually be a third of the super view height. So we're going to use the relational operator there, the equal relational operator, and change things. And let's change this multiplier. But before that, please make a note that we also have other relational operators, a less than and a greater than also. So keep that in mind, and our multiplier will be 0.33. And let's do the same thing for the middle and the bottom view. So again, equal heights. The constraint appears there at the bottom. And similarly, one more, equal height. Now let's go ahead, highlight our appropriate views and change the multiplier. So there we go. Right. So now we will add a leading constraint for each of these subviews, pinning them to the leading edge of the super view. So let's do that. So there we have one constraint, and similarly do the same thing. So leading space to container margin, and similarly for the bottom, a leading space to container margin, so that it is each of these subviews are pinned to the extreme left of the super view. So you can see a margin of -20. So basically it's going 20 points beyond the margin and sticking to the container rather than the margin. Okay. So now let's go to the stop view out here and pin it to the top of the container. And similarly, let's create a horizontal spacing of 0. I apologize, a vertical spacing of 0 between the middle and top view, and similarly a vertical spacing of 0 between the bottom and the middle views. So as you can see right now, we've got an orange sign out here, which means we've got a few warnings. So let's fix these misplaced views by clicking on Fix Misplacement. So as you can see, the screen is getting updated. And yes, it looks much better now, closer to the flag of Germany. So now that we have no AutoLayout issues, let's go back and preview things for the iPhone 6. And let's trigger the simulator. And here's how our image looks like for the portrait and landscape views. So you can see a bit of a gap at the bottom, but I'm not going to be very finicky at the moment, and let's continue. So let's assume we want to write some code that changes the pattern to the left to the pattern on the right. So one way we could do that is by suppressing the second red subview, and after doing that, changing the color of the top subview to blue. So once we do that, we will get the pattern on the right. So let's quickly write some code to do that. Right, so here we are back on our canvas. So let's first hide the document editor and open up the assistant editor where we can write some code. And let's hide the utility section, move things a bit. And here we have our view controller. So I'm going to first create 2 outlets to the top view and the middle view. So just pause for a moment and think why we have selected these 2 views. Then let's hide this function which we don't need, as well as this comment. And I'm going to copy a function out here. So this function is called flag of Ukraine. So what it does is it firstly changes the background color of the top view to red. So it's using the RGB combination with values of 0 for red and green and 1 for blue and an alpha of 1. And similarly, it removes the middle view from the super view. So just pause here and think what repercussion this has. So basically, the moment the middle view is removed from the super view, that means all its constraints will be disabled. And now, of course, let's add this function into view.didLoad so that it is invoked. Now let's preview things quickly. So as you can see, things have gone for a toss here. So this is the portrait mode. Let's look at things in the landscape mode and see how. Okay, I can see suddenly I saw a dash of blue appear and disappear. So that could be something to do with my constraints. But the bottom line is things are not working as we want them to be. Now let's go back to the constraint view out here and identify all the constraints that play upon or act upon the red subview or the middle subview. So as you can see, there's one out here, and there are quite a few down the line. So these constraints will not come into play when this red subview is removed. So now the strategy moving ahead would be, I'm going to create some constraints assuming that the red subview doesn't appear. So I'll just take my black subview and my gold or yellow subview and add some constraints, keeping just these 2 in mind. Just one more thing for you to note is that the constraints that we have at the moment have a priority of 1000. Okay, so now let's create a constraint between the top and bottom subview. So we'll create a vertical spacing. So here's our constraint. And what we will do is change this constant value of 187 to 0. So as you can see, this subview moves up. But the important thing is that we want this constraint to only apply when needed. So basically, we're going to do one more thing, and that is change its priority. So just pause here for a moment and see that each constraint has 3 priorities. You have got a priority with a value of 1000, which is required, high with 750, and low with 250. So I'm going to change the priority of this particular constraint to a non-required priority. So in this case, I could use high or low. So I'm going to use 750. So as you can see, there's a dashed line appearing here. So let's make a note of that and let's move ahead. So this particular priority will only kick in if any other mandatory priorities cannot. Okay? And which will be the case when we call the flag of Ukraine. So let's trigger the simulator. And as you can see, our red subview has disappeared and the blue and yellow subviews have a vertical spacing of 0. So essentially, our high priority has kicked in. So the important thing to now see is what happens if we disable the flag of Ukraine function. So let's go back to the assistant editor and disable it. So in this case, these mandatory priorities should kick in. So they are all enabled. So basically the optional priority should not kick in. So let's see if that happens. So there we are. We have the flag of Germany kicking in and the optional priority has not. So let's once again enable the function and run the simulator. There we go. We have the flag of Ukraine back once again.